Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 92 of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. This is going to be a long but informative, interesting, and controversial episode as immigration attorney Nicholas Mireles and I discuss a broad range of practice, legal, cultural, and political topics. Note that this discussion was recorded before the President's recent suggestions about changing the U.S. immigration system. As a reminder, you can watch the live video recording on YouTube by searching for the Immigration Lawyers channel on that site. And you can find video recordings of this episode and previous ones, along with shorter clips and other good stuff. Please like and subscribe there, as well as anywhere else that you watch the program. Finally, I am having a live Q&A session on Friday, May 31st at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, for a small and private group of lawyers and law students, where you can ask questions about the practice of immigration law, business, and legal issues. I will specifically be addressing social media marketing, which should be the number one focus for lawyers when thinking about marketing and branding for the future, as well as talking about the 90-day rule. I will be accepting one or two more people to stop the group from getting too big. You can email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com to RSVP. And with that, let's get it started. Welcome to the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. I am the host, Attorney John Khosravi, and I practice U.S. immigration law exclusively. For more information about the program, please visit www.immigrationlawyerspodcast.com. Please note that this recording is informational only and does not constitute legal advice. Please consult with a licensed attorney for specific legal guidance that suits your case. Also, this recording is copyrighted and written permission is required for rebroadcasting. For more information about me, please visit www.jqqlaw.com. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. We're going to have another fun one with Nicholas Mireles. The last one was very popular, and I wanted to make it a regular thing because Nicholas is, on the street, on the ground kind of information and kind of just talking about what we're going through. Thanks so much for coming on again.
Of course, John. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And actually today, my wife's grandmother is going through naturalization, and we had an ASC appointment that was set for next week, but she's going on a trip. So before I came here, we just showed up at the biometrics place to see if we get early appointments, and it's an interesting thing happened. I always would tell my clients, go there early in the morning, the first thing in the morning, so you're the first person there, and they'll just see you. But when we went there, they're like, we're not taking walk-ins until the afternoon, so we have to go back home and come back. And Nicholas was telling me, it just depends on the day, who's there, and location, just like so much of immigration.
I've let's see, in that world, because I deal with people wanting to do biometrics before the appointment, sometimes missing and coming after. And so what I've found locally, at least, is that down in downtown 1015 Wilshire, just on the other side of the 110 on Wilshire, they're very flexible. Come in the morning, maybe they'll see you. If not, they'll tell you to come back in the afternoon. I've also had it to where I had a client last year on an I-90 green card renewal where he went with his mom and at the El Monte one, which is very busy, very popular, and they basically said no. But my friend spoke to the security guard and basically, because of the conversations we had, kind of understood what he needed to really kind of say to kind of cut through everybody else's reasons.
Yeah.
And because she had an upcoming travel, because there was medical issues that her husband was dealing with and needed to go abroad for a surgery, they were able to get in that day. And so it sounds like for you at the location you went out with, it's like you said, it depends on the day, it depends on the whoever you're dealing with, the person at the check-in desk, the security guard that lets people in the building.
They have a lot of power. To be friends with the security guard, especially at NATS, like there's NATS, every field office and every office has their own security guard. Knowing them, talking with them, it helps a lot to get things going. They pretty much take a role of an officer, of a USCIS officer sometimes, and getting a notice to the officers, letting them know something's going on. They can help out a lot if they want to.
It's funny and tragic at the same time to think that these private contracted security companies, not police officers, they're just companies where I think you take an exam, get a test, and then you get a badge and a gun, that they become de facto ask me questions, Q&As, and you see it at Chadforth here in Los Angeles, you see it across, like you said, in all these offices. And what if that officer's wrong?
Yeah.
What if that officer doesn't like you? What if that officer just likes being in a position of power and telling you what to do?
Yeah.
And if you're somebody that says, okay, well, they told me, maybe they told you to file a reschedule online, and you do, and it doesn't get through because that's not what they're doing anymore, and all of a sudden you're denied.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's another kind of another factor in this sea of factors that you have to keep in mind, that even the security guards can kind of make or break your simple request as far as an ASC.
And some are super helpful, and some are. I mean, I've had one that was just say some super racist stuff. And I'm just looking at him like it was really busy there. I'm like, well, it's busy. He's like, well, people shouldn't keep coming here. And I'm just like, what? They're paying you right now for being here. Okay.
Yeah, you're without them, you don't have a job.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, I just let it go. I'm going to say this idiot, but then again, there's security guards that are super cool when you go and they help you out and stuff.
Then I've seen it to where they'll tell people to come back at this day. They'll be here. Like, I'll help you. So I guess we can kind of criticize those that are the bad examples, but we should also be celebrating that there are times, and this is just in our world, right?
Yeah.
So much of what we do, and this is, I think, something we touched on our previous episode, so much of what we do has to do with a human being ultimately making a decision. Mm-hmm. And the law is the law is the law, sure, but a human being actually apply the law. Mm-hmm. And so if you are not going into every federal building, every check-in, every appointment with the idea that people can make it harder on you if you're going to be difficult, if you're not going in with that piece of kind of intel, then a long day could become longer because you don't respect security guards, or you think ICE is, subhuman because of what they're doing. You can think that, but it doesn't mean you should wear that on your sleeve, because they could then make your life a lot harder.
Yeah, they can think their own way. Another note on ASC appointments, you don't have to necessarily go to the same location as listed.
Correct.
People go on trips, from LA to New York, and I'll say, okay, go to the local one in New York. And we're lucky in LA, there's like 50 of them here, but like in New York, like I have clients that have to drive an hour to go to them in other states. It's pretty bad. But you can go to different locations, go sooner. I'm not sure if you can miss it and then use that same one to go. You have to get a new one.
I've had people successful with that.
Oh, really?
Again, it comes down to what I believe is the autonomy of each ASC Biometrics Center, that they're an application support center. They're almost seemingly a contract center for the government. Yeah. And as I was telling you earlier, I do believe, I think this was told to me, I think at an ASC center, that they actually make money per interview, per ASC appointment. So it behooves them to take more walk-ins, because guess what? That's more for their bottom line. Or if you're from a different office, then that would have been one that they then,
went up,
Exactly. And so I've had people filing an I-131 reentry permit, long time, green card holders who want to be gone from the United States for longer than 6 months. I've had them, we file, they leave, a month later they come back, and then they get their ASC, but they kind of want to dip in and dip out. And so I'll do the same thing, where go here, kind of explain the situation, be nice, look professional, play to their baser instincts of, judging you.
Yeah.
And if it makes sense to them, then they'll help you out.
I tell people, like my clients, that immigration, number one thing, once you pass the law, is just people judging you just like someone judged you on the street. So you got to prepare for that.
And in this political climate, people are so much more sensitive to things that they otherwise wouldn't have thought twice on. But now that, political parties have really weaponized immigration as this massive behemoth thing for the sake of their own rhetoric and goals, you now have everyday civil surgeons working for the government now thinking, oh, well, if you're from this part of the world, then maybe you're just, doing this. Or if you have this type of relationship or business, I heard there's a lot of fraud there. Whether that's in fact reality
on a whim,
or not.
like just making things up.
Big time.
Yeah. And one thing that's to note is if you have an older person that's going to give their ASC, their fingerprints potentially could not go in the system properly, or they can't use it. So they'll resend it to biometrics to come back. And if someone's just left the country on a trip, they're going to have to reschedule and stuff. But that does happen when older people, especially, their fingerprints disappear and having to come back. And in my case, like with my wife's grandma, my wife's grandma, that's my grandma's wife. My wife's grandma, like, it took like 50 times, and the machine kept reading red, do, until they wiped her finger so many times they got it. And hopefully it did. I mean, we have the situation where we go to the interviews, and pretty much 10% of the time I'm in interviews now for adjustment, they're just trying to do the fingerprinting in the system. And they move it a little bit in the system, the wire. I don't know what kind of instruments they're using, but about 10% of our time is just trying to get a fingerprint scan going. It's like, what's going on here?
Well, it's funny, right? Because in our district in Southern California, we have 5 offices, right? And some of our offices, you have the triage window where you check in actually doing your biometrics. We see that at Santa Ana, and then sometimes they'll implement that in Chatsworth or Los Angeles downtown.
It's off and on,
But it's off and on. But how wonderful is it when you get to an appointment a half an hour early, you're not called for a half an hour to 45 minutes after your call time. to do that simple procedure.
Yeah.
And if it does take a little bit longer, then it's taken care of there, as opposed to wasting the interviewing officer's time. And I talk to interviewing officers about this all the time, that it is such a waste of their precious time, as they're being told by their bosses, you need to get more done quicker, but also be very efficient. And so it's another interesting point about biometrics that I'm seeing is I'm seeing a lot more recapturing now than I ever have. Meaning you'll get someone who's found an I-751 getting that 2-year condition removed from their green card because they've only been married for 2 years or less. I'm getting a lot more, don't worry about it, we've recaptured it. Which is so nice that they're utilizing technology in the 21st century to say, we have your fingerprints from a few years ago, they're still good, we're just going to run them again.
The only problem I have with that is when they started upping that up again, they wouldn't tell me that. So I had one case for 6 months, I was calling every month saying, we didn't get the biometrics, I don't want to miss it. And they'll just say, wait for it. And then until eventually I got a letter in the mail that said, we recaptured it. I'm like, we could have told me, I spent so many hours on that, got the second 1-800 number, they could just told me that. So now I'm like, but I have another I-751 case where client got the receipt and I didn't get it. And the client wouldn't tell me they got the receipt, so I'm like getting worried and nervous. Oh no, this happened again. But I'm like, why did they not send me a receipt? So I went online to try to punch in to say we never got a receipt, so I get one sent to me. But it's still within 30 days, so the system won't allow me to do that. So on Thursday, I have to resubmit it because maybe they didn't put my G28 on the record. So then I have to call and figure that out. You know? So it's just like a needed work for it's such a solid case. I even told them, you don't have to hire me because you guys are such a couple. You have so many joint documents. But they're like, you know what, just do it. We don't want to deal with it. And so it's like, oh, easy case, but it's not. They have to call them and spend hours on the phone until I get a hold of somebody. Then we call-in system that they changed that call-in tree, I think, because it was like for a while we could do 1161, and then it went 1664 or 2 or 1. It keeps changing. I think they know people are catching on of how to get to an officer, so they did some sort of rolling system that they make change it. But at the same time, some officers I've talked to recently are pretty nice. I was surprised at how helpful they were. I think maybe they're getting less people calling them, so they're more relaxed.
Well, I think that's exactly it. We, on the local level, in a lot of leadership roles that I serve on for some of our attorney organizations, I see from the government side that in implementing systems that make it harder to actually get to a person, in their mind, they're fleshing out a lot of the nonsense calls. Somebody calling to say, I'm a U.S. citizen, I need to get my passport renewed. That's not someone they should spend time on. Oh, I need to get a form. So we're hearing, and I'm seeing that same type of idea, that they're actually nicer once you get through them, because if you got through, you actually have a problem, one, and then it's not a waste of time. And two, if you're an attorney, okay, we can speak the language of immigration and make that call so much quicker and actually solve a problem.
I imagine if someone's not a lawyer to call in, they're like, F form I-8432. And
no, 797 is the best, because on immigration forms, it's anytime there's something by the government, they have a 797. It's just like something happened on your case, and people mistake that for the particular form number, which in our business is how we kind of abbreviate cases. Oh, you filed this, you filed that. So it is funny. But again, to your point, this is the current trend, is that in an era of do-it-yourself, I can read online and take care of it, we're now seeing people wanting to take care of themselves, but then realizing even quote-unquote straightforward cases are anything but. And sometimes it is in everyone's best interest to hire somebody, almost like a chaperone, to just say, I'm here to make sure everything goes off without a hitch. And if there is a problem, you don't lose sleep over it, because your first thought is, I have no idea how to fix it. You just, let me know and we'll take care of it.
Because people will write a letter to the wrong place thinking for an RFE and they'll get denied. I have a adjustment case where they came to me and they already done the K1 on their own, and then they came for me adjustment. I'm like, listen, you did all the bulk of it, you don't have to hire me. They're like, you know what, we did a K1, we got RFE, it took so much time. It took us 17 months to get the K1 issue.
Wow.
And so
the good days, it was less than 6 months.
Yeah, and so I'm like, should have just got married and came with the green card at that point for trying to shave that K1 time. And I was like, well, there's all these internet websites that say do K1 and stuff like that on your own, but that stuff happens, and that happens enough where people get RFEs, they don't respond, or they don't get the letter, and then how do you fix that? Or people change their address, don't get the appointment notice. I have one client who got really happy after 3 months of filing, he got the appointment notice, so he sent it to me, he said, our appointment's here, and I read it, it has someone else's name on it, so they sent the wrong place. So he's like, what's going to happen to that person? I'm like, well, they're pretty screwed, because unless they have a lawyer getting a copy, they're not going to get their copy. They're going to miss their appointment. They're going to get a denial letter, and they're not going to know how to fix that. So they're going to have to spend all the money they would have spent to a lawyer just to fix one missing interview. And hopefully officers can be helpful with
and not anything they did. I mean, that's what's so interesting about this world is oftentimes problems arise not because you did anything wrong, but it has to do with the other side, data entry, doing a 7 instead of a 9, a T instead of a U. You know, there's so much space for human error that it really is almost like walking a tightrope, and even for cases that are seemingly slam dunks.
Yeah.
And that's why it comes down to, you know, if people have questions, they need a call, they need an email. I know everybody's scared to reach out to a lawyer, or as a lawyer, always looking for, how can I get more traffic? Well, ultimately, people are going to call you for simple questions. You should take all of those simple questions, because communicating with the public and getting them to feel comfortable with you is, I think, the hardest part of our work, because there's so much negative stereotypes out there as far as what a lawyer is and is not.
Yeah.
And because of the internet and, do it yourself, you don't need to hire an attorney. It's like, okay, like you said, I've had this happen many times. You'll spend twice as much time, twice as much money, and get half as much results not hiring me than just hiring me, getting it done the first part. But sometimes people need to learn the hard way, right?
And then the client asked, well, could we help them? And, you know, back in the day, I would have tried to call USCIS and said, you know, this person got this receipt, but now it's going to take me at least an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And chances are they're just going to say, and not do anything. So I was kind of like, I'm over it. Like, sorry.
Well, there lies the other big question is, there's ripple effects, there's butterfly effects for all of these changes. And even see things on the government side that are small, there's these massive ripple effects that they don't really understand how they affect the public.
Yeah.
But we end up being this bridge in between, that we can tell the government what the public's dealing with, just as we tell the public and our clients what the government's dealing with.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know, ultimately something as simple as, you have a fingerprinting appointment. Sometimes that could be the bane of your existence, right? Even before you actually get to the merits of a case, or, you know, an RFE going over, let's say in a business case, you know, the structure and how people lay out and who's actually manages who, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so it's a testament to things are only getting more difficult, even though things aren't fundamentally changing. It's just how they're actually dealing with it internally.
Yeah. So it's just madness. Now, you know, going into client management stuff, we talked about this today. I was getting one client who was texting me, really worried and stuff. And it's been a debate that's been going on since the beginning of practice of law, is how much time you want to spend with your client and how much, what's it called, presence, or what's the terminology? Just accessibility.
Gotcha.
Yeah, accessibility do you give? Now, I use social media a lot because of marketing, but I hate doing it practically, and I use my phone for stuff. And so I don't like when people text me, but if they need to, I'm down, I got to do it. How do you deal with accessibility? Like, there's this old school thought, and the older attorneys that I've worked with and talked to, they said, don't be too accessible because you'll lose value in the client's eyes and they want to use it too much. But one of the things I've built my brand on is the accessibility to me as the attorney. And 99% of the time, after we file the case, or just the beginning, we get things done fast, they don't even want to talk with me. But every once in a while, one client comes out and then wants to take all that time.
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen? How have you dealt with this issue?
So for nearly 6 years that I've been doing this, I've realized that the best thing I can do when I'm getting to know a potential client, not even a client yet, when I'm getting to know them, it comes down to, okay, are they going to require more than the average amount of attorney time? Mm-hmm. Specifically, are they going to ask questions about stuff that normally people don't ask? Are they going to want confirmations about things that people don't normally need confirmation? And so I try to address it early on internally about how accessible I'm going to be. So in that way, I don't have a kind of carte blanche, email me anytime, day or night, call me. Mm-hmm. Additionally, I think early on in the process and the relationship, people do want to feel like you're accessible because there's an insecurity there because they don't know you yet.
Yeah.
So I think, if anything, I tend to rule on the side of a lot of accessibility early, and then kind of wean it off as far as direct accessibility, i.e. texting or phone calls, and try to say, for the sake of two things. One, a record. So I always go email so we have a record to go back to.
Definitely.
And then two, to kind of remind them, both directly and sometimes more subtly and indirectly, this is a better way to communicate these types of issues because these are not emergencies.
Yeah.
But I do think you really have to be in touch with how people interact, the psychology of people. If you get somebody that calls you who's really nervous and scared about all these little things, you need to put in your mind the likelihood that they're going to want a lot of your attention.
Yeah.
And does that mean you're going to price different? Does that mean you have to lay down the ground rules? Are you going to be less kind of easygoing because you know they'll walk all over you? As far as the old school mentality, though, to your point, I think it's kind of like the idea of old school dating. Oh, if you're too accessible, you know, they're not gonna want to date you. And I think I just don't think that's how it is anymore. I think the consumer these days, especially the under 40 crowd, I think they want to feel confident early on, and accessibility is absolutely at the core of that. Because if you're not accessible, it's kind of like, well, this guy is or this woman is, so I'll just go to them. And so sometimes it behooves you, almost to an annoyance, to be really accessible early, and then again start trying to sunsetting that accessibility or transitioning to something where, for example, I get a call, somebody says, "Oh, I got my ASC appointment. I'll go." It's like, okay, great. I emailed you the appointment notice we got as well, so I'm aware. It says, okay, great. Email me, please, if you have any other updates. I like to kind of keep a record of it because I won't have a record of our phone call. And I think by really putting it in terms that our clients and the public can understand, I think it says, oh, that does make sense. It is good to have a record of what we're talking about, because it not only protects us, but it also protects them. Because if we say something or don't say something and then try to say, oh, we told you that, they can go back and say, no, see, it's not in the email. So obviously, if you're a heavy email like I am, you better make sure to be saying everything you're supposed to be saying, right?
Yeah, that's why even my post-consultation emails take a lot of time to write, because I'm like, gotta make sure it's all there, everything we said, so it doesn't come back later. Every once in a while, I got one case where I forgot to mention to get a police certificate. I usually at the beginning, even when I'm doing I-130 consular processing, which would take over a year, I'll say, get me all the consular processing stuff, other than the police certificates that may expire. And I didn't ask for the military record, conscription record, where I was forced in the military for 2 years. And so we are starting consular processing, and I asked for it now, but then the guy says, I have a copy of it, but getting the original is going to be really difficult for me to do. And, you know, we still have months and months, so it's like we have a copy, so until we get an appointment, we don't need it for like 4 months. But I'm like, well, if I told him 6 months earlier I have 130 phase, I'll give him more time. For some reason, I forgot. I was checking my records, and that was a thing. I'm like, oh, I should. Because if I didn't have a record of that, I would have just said, I told you, because I always tell people, it was just a one-off incident where I did it, and it was that one that would have affected. Usually it's easier to get, but for some reason for him it's difficult. So and that plays into the price structure of it too. One thing I've done, because like some clients just after we file are so needy or just want to sit and talk, I've made a post-filing limit of how many legal hours there are until it goes into charging legal fees again. And that's because of primarily too the RFEs that are coming that are just insane, that are asking for all the same stuff over again. And I don't necessarily always charge it, but I have it there just in case needed if the RFE is really crazy or if the client it was unexpectedly, require a lot of time. I've gotten good at being able to see who these people are that are going to be sucking up a lot of time. But every once in a while, someone will come very sophisticated, very down to the point. I'm like, smart, sharp, and I'm like, okay, it's going to be quick. They have all documents ready. And then a different side of it comes out where it's just like hold my hand from beginning to end every day. I'm like, I did not see that. And, your judgment of character gets better the more you do this, but sometimes, these get through. And then it just takes so much time. And, it just takes time for other clients. It's not fair. Other people are paying you as well. Your family have responsibility for some person. Especially if it's valid stuff, it's one thing. But if it's just paranoia, it's just I can't help you with that. I'll try to calm you down, but there's only so much I can do.
Well, isn't that the kind of part about being a lawyer that you don't learn in law school, you don't learn studying the bar, is that you're an attorney, you're someone that's going to interpret, translate, and advocate on the law, for the law, and how the law applies to your client. But the other things you're also going to be is a psychologist.
Yeah.
You're going to be a family therapist. Sure. You're going to be somebody that, because of how intimate the work is, you're really inside their inner circle, at least for a time being. So inevitably, these other things come out. Things with their employer, things with their relationship, things about themselves, maybe even trauma they've suffered, because maybe you're the type of person that they trust, and so it just kind of naturally comes out. So it is an interesting part of the practice, especially as a solo, that you have to realize, as is the case with surgery, which you've used as an analogy in the past, John, you never really know until you cut them open. And you can plan everything you want, but until you actually get into the case, until things are filed, until things were rolling, you're going to have to kind of prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And that's why it is kind of a case-by-case and such a specific art on how to quote people, on how to deal with flat fees as opposed to billable hours and charging people by the hour. Because at the end of the day, we want to take care of our clients because they will then take care of us. Especially if you're building a practice and building your reputation, the last thing you want to do is have this perception that you cut somebody short, that you got paid and then you let it go. And so it's kind of an interesting part of developing our professional careers is that, yes, being a lawyer and being within the law and advocating is your job. But there's all these other parts that you better start also perfecting. Otherwise, you're probably always going to work for somebody and never work for yourself because somebody else is going to have that polish that you just don't have.
I mean, although the complicated stuff is the law and learning that and you go to law school for that, you're never going to be a great lawyer unless you get all the other stuff. You're never going to make good money and be successful. Because even like when we go to an adjustment of status interview, how I treat the officer there, how I come off, if I come off sleazy or kind, if I'm rude or not. Sometimes the officers have a wall because they just got done with the interview where the attorney's too aggressive. And they're like, oh, not another attorney. If I go there with a smile and just say, you know what, nice to meet you. I'm just going to sit in the corner. I'm cool. I'm not going to be that kind of guy. And, they're going to treat your clients better. It's one of those things you don't want the client to get hit because of the attorney. And so having the good demeanor, be mindful of how you look, how you act, how you dress, really, because people judge you. And so if a lawyer comes in, like just dilapidated looking, it's going to put off the officer, put off the security guard, put off the clients themselves. There's a lot of nuance that they don't teach you in law school because law school is about the law, but not practicing the law.
Oh, yeah.
And so practicing law is a completely different beast. And, until you get a client and someone pays you, you're not going to be practicing law. So it's more important. The horse is actually, the ability to make money and get a client. The cart is the law, but the horse comes first. You can't get anywhere without that horse.
Well, and on that exact idea, going to nursing school and being a nurse, very different. Talk to anybody that's a nurse. Going to school to become a teacher and becoming a teacher and teaching, very different. The law is no different, to where I think this day and age we get so obsessed with, if I just do A, B, and C, I'll get there and then things will be fine. When in fact, A, B, and C is the easy part. As crazy as that sounds. The bar is not fun nor easy. However, once you jump off that cliff, you have your license, you're literally at the bottom of a mountain, having just got over those mountains, staring back up and say, okay, time to learn this. But therein lies the beauty of what we get to do, is that you're always learning, you're always perfecting. And you and I work with attorneys all the time who stopped perfecting their craft, and it shows.
Yeah.
And it's immigration is not property rights and property law and trusts and wills. Immigration changes literally daily. I mean, if you're watching this, it's probably because you're thinking, I need to make sure I'm always keeping up with what's going on, because you're paying attention to, because of how piecemeal immigration law has been over the last 30 years, little things apply here, little things apply there. So if you're not constantly perfecting that craft, then you might miss something, and that thing might be the ultimate variable that costs your client, and then that costs you, and ultimately you're spending more time after the fact rather than just kind of staying on that hustle early on.
I mean, it's so crazy how it changes constantly, like in both ways. So I have a case of 245I. The client went to several attorneys that didn't know about it, and they came to me. I'm like, oh, that's an easy 245I case. You open and shut. And this guy has been like living under a bridge essentially for the last 10 years, worried about this. And so 245I is, you have to study. I think I have other stuff I talked about it, but that ended, it sunsetted in like 2000, 2001.
Mm-hmm.
So all the immigration lawyers who came in after that, unless they studied themselves or had a mentor that told them about it, they're going to miss that issue. Or, they're practicing, and then the Adam Walsh Act happens, where if your petitioner is like sexual abuse of a child or something, they can't petition unless they get a waiver. So all of a sudden, like, if you didn't keep up on the rules that this changed, or the asylum, Real ID Act changed some nuanced stuff, or for students, there's a lawsuit injunction that came, but the DS status doesn't cover you anymore. You go into unlawful presence. If you don't know this stuff and how they're doing it, or right now they've gone for adjustment, they've gotten really picky about proving that if you're on an F1 student visa, then even if you marry a U.S. citizen, you're adjusting, they want to show that you're in status going to school and it wasn't a fraudulent school. And you got to be up on this to make sure to check all the I-20s and have them with you, transcripts potentially, so they can show that you really went to school. Mm-hmm. Even when it doesn't matter, they want to ask for that stuff. But it just changes every day, and so it's like you got to really be on top of it. And that takes a lot of time, there's always, you got to spend the hours. There's no way around it. And clients that's kind of the value clients paying for. I'm not necessarily spending all the time sitting with you on your case, but I'm studying everything else in the meantime. So if something happens, I'll know what's going on. I'm going to the meetings, I talk to other people, going to these AILA CBP meetings, AILA USCIS meetings, to sit there for a couple hours. I might be there for 3 hours and I'll learn nothing, but I have to do it every month because maybe one time I'll learn something different that's going to affect your case, and that's what you're paying for if you get an attorney that stays on top of it. But it's hard. You see, and I hate to bash a whole group of people, but it seems like generally practicing law for a long time, especially immigration, there's a burnout where I do see them stop doing that continuing education. Either they're feeling like they know everything, or in addition to that, just being over it, kind of seeing all this garbage constantly, same issues. And that's unfortunate because I see older attorneys doing malpractice because of that. Now, there's the younger ones who don't know what they're doing. There's the older ones who don't care, and there's people in the middle that just both of the above. But that's something I do see happen, not continue with the education with the changing nature of it.
Well, it's managing clients, managing client expectations, being able to try to project what's going to happen in a world where you really can't project anything anymore.
Yeah.
I think that comes down to, as an attorney, you are their representative, you're their advocate. If you don't know it, then you shouldn't expect them to know it. And so vice versa, the clients are saying, here's all this money to give us peace of mind that if something happens, you'll know about it.
Yeah.
And if you don't know about it, you'll know where to figure it out. And so it is an interesting concept as an immigration attorney that if you're not constantly kind of on that hustle and grind, if you're not trying to continue to A+ everything, rather than people that do get burned out and say, a B+ is just as fine, then it is worrisome, because I think right now the current political climate, their goal is to oversaturate this side of things, just get people to say forget it.
Yeah.
But if this is your way of life, if this is how you create a living, if this is how you're paying back your loans and trying to build a family and a life, well, then you can't just forget it.
Yeah.
Additionally, I don't think you can leave immigration. It's too exciting. It's too meaningful. What, you're going to go chase ambulances now? Because PI is not as much of a headache. No, it's a headache. It's just a different type of headache, right? And so it's kind of a testament to practice management is not just about the law. It's about client management, expectations. It's also about your own mental and psychological health. It's about being physically healthy. Because if you're grinding and one day your back goes out because you've been sitting too long, your eyes go, that's something that you need to be considerate of. And if you're under 40, if you're under 30 even, you need to start thinking that this is a 50-year career. And so you need to start creating habits early on. And that comes with balance, that comes with stress management, that comes with realizing, this case I could make X amount of dollars on. But the amount of stress and anxiety I'm going to get from it will not be worth it in the end. And you have to start evaluating that, even when it's not your firm, even when it's not your money. Because if you don't start doing that now and creating those habits, it's going to get harder as you get older, because the bills get longer, you start bringing on staff, and now you have to take in everything to be able to meet your bottom line at the end of each month.
That's funny. I had this one guy call yesterday, and it took him like 20 minutes to say something that could have been said in 2 seconds. And at the end, I told him, I'm like, listen, I can't help you, and if I really wanted to, I could help him. I would charge a lot of money, but I'm like, he's just going to drive me crazy doing this. But I told him, if you next attorney to call, just say this. He's like, no, but you wouldn't know. I'm like, no, I wouldn't know. I'm not an idiot. Just say this. You're going to burn out the attorney. And sometimes I'm like, I shouldn't say that because it might leave a bad review, say this attorney put me down or something. But I'm like, I'm saying for your own benefit.
Yeah.
Don't drain the hell out of this guy. But, the 5 years ago, I would have just kept with it because I said, or 10 years ago, I would have said, I need, to get this case and stuff to help this guy. But, I would notice, getting drained, and it would take my time. And, time is important. One thing you mentioned about being physically fit, a couple months ago, I was, walking on a hill. There's a Whole Foods next to my house, and for some reason, the parking is kind of not really a hill, but it's got a slope. And I was walking up it and down, and, I felt like my legs were noodles. I didn't have too much control, and I was loosey-goosey walking down. And, it's kind of weird. So I started exercising again because of that. And now when I walk down there, I have complete control of my muscles going down and my movement of my body. And I feel so much stronger internally, and it's given me some self-confidence on its own, where I feel really assured of myself, and not in an arrogant way, but just in my body, my muscles, and my bones. And so when I enter a room, I know that has a presence. And when I sit down with somebody and I sit comfortably and I know, my body's working well, I'm not atrophied from not working out, just sitting all day. So that has all these little things can add value and cause you to make more money and more success because, my body's feeling better, so I have an extra hour of patience to go and study Foreign Affairs Manual, whereas before I would give out or wanted to eat something or just be tired or something like that. It's interesting. You got to to take a phrase from one of these gurus online, to 10x it, to take things to the next level, you got to think of every little thing. Like Kobe, he watches the tape, or Michael Jordan watches the tape and look at little nuanced things that could change their game and make it better. And I'm like, okay, I got to not take these certain cases because they're taking too much of my time. With that extra time, then I got to study this certain stuff, and then I got to learn about marketing better, and I got to work out, and then constantly, talk and hear myself speak to be a better speaker. Because I listen to my own podcasts to edit them, and sometimes I'll notice where I'm slurring words or eating game, and I'm like, oh man, like I didn't understand myself as well, or I'll won't finish a sentence, and in my mind when I'm talking right now, I think I finished a sentence, but I'll hear it over again. I'm like, I cut myself off, and I didn't get the information out, and I must be doing that sometimes when I'm in front of USCIS or a consultation. So like watching the tape is really important to constantly think, am I speaking clearly? Am I doing everything right? Because speaking for me is something I have to learn how to do. I wasn't a good speaker. You're natural. But for me, like the idea to have a podcast right now, 15 years ago would be unbelievable. My family would laugh and say, you're putting yourself out as a speaker. It's not happening. They thought I was going to be an academic, like a scientist behind the scenes. But I had to forcefully get to this outgoing nature of coming and talk and stuff like that. But you got to do it to succeed. There's no way around it. I want to be successful in.
Well, and I think even just that entire anecdote, it really illustrates the aspect of a career versus a job means it is a 24-hour, 365 experience, a career. A job is you clock in, you clock out. You can turn off once you leave, you turn back on when you get there. Yeah. And if you are here and you are a practicing attorney, if you're not living every day to try to become a better attorney, then you're missing out on a lot of your potential. One thing I think about a lot of is that your late 20s, when most people get their license, through your 30s, it's the time that you have the least amount of experience, but you are physically and mentally your strongest.
Yeah.
And so it's funny to think that it's the time you're most insecure that you have you're the strongest. Because as you get older and you get mentally strong, your body starts getting weak, right? And so I think about this a lot. I'll be 33 this year. And I think about how right now is the time I need to absolutely grind because I can.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have any children. John, I know you have nearly 2 children, almost. And I know that before you had kids, you could put in hours that you can no longer do. Because you need to balance out your work with your personal life, right?
Go to all the ALA meetings, everywhere.
Exactly. And so when I think about not having children, not having a mortgage, I think, and I talk about this with my wife, who's a white-collar professional, but not an attorney, I say, we're grinding so hard. We don't get to spend the quality time we want to. It seems like, we're not necessarily making crazy money, especially given the hours we're putting into it, the abuse you deal with. But if not now, when? Yeah. And I think it's something to be reminded of, that it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
That if you want something easy, you shouldn't be in this business. It's kind of like going back to working out, going back to the Kobe mentality. Working out's hard. Getting stronger, thinner, being healthy is difficult because it's not comfortable. In this day and age, we strive for comfort. Yeah. We strive for accessibility. We want things done right away. So if you ever have to wait, if anything ever hurts, you're like, oh, this sucks. I don't want to do this anymore. But then you realize that the only way you get stronger is if you work out and you hurt yourself, almost intentionally, right? And so I think about this a lot as far as how I approach my firm, the practice of law, and then me just as a professional. Because like you said, all it takes is one day to be like, oh, I didn't feel that yesterday. Or, oh, I can't really remember like I used to. Yeah. I can remember a conversation I had 5 years ago with a PC, a potential client, who then reaches out to me out of the blue, like, oh yeah, you were an F1, and then blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And that memory is going to go, because eventually these things do. The idea is that I'm trying to sculpt those things now, so in the long term, I can hold on to that kind of energy or that amount of gas I have in the tank longer than I normally would if I would just kind of say, oh, whatever, like. Yeah. It got done, so I won't worry about it. Or, oh, I'm just going to watch TV, or I don't really have to worry about that new memo. I don't think it affects me.
It's interesting stuff. So what's been your week and since the last time we talked? Was there any particular case that stood out?
Let's see. So I was out of town, which was nice last week. So actually, speaking of practice management, and I'll take a quick sec to say this, even leaving your office as a solo practitioner, one of the things you get better at is being able to gear up to when you're going to be gone. right? You can have the away messages. You can have, your answering service or your secretary, whoever's responding to calls. You can have a prompt that says, oh, he or she will be back in a few days. But I think leading up to it, there's a lot of little things you can do to make it so that your state of mind is completely present in the experience. And so where I had service, I was abroad. So I was able to get things, but there was a way that I've learned through the years to be able to respond to people. Additionally, people that hire you like to know you go on vacation. People like to know you're spending time with your family because that's, in their mind, what normal attorneys do.
Yeah.
If you're living in a cubicle for every day, all day, it's like, oh, wow, like, are you not a good attorney? I thought, good attorneys dress in nice suits and are, have nice cars and these types of things. So it was one of these things where coming back, because I was able to manage.
What were some specific, a couple of tips?
So a couple of tips is leading up to a departure date, you need to make sure anything that absolutely needs to get done. Because if you put off something to when you get back, that client is going to be emailing you and calling you. And when they find out you're gone, the panic is going to set in.
Yeah.
So I had a couple of RFE responses that were due, and I got those out before I left. Additionally, I got a new case filed, I think a change of status case filed, and that was kind of my focus the few days before I left. Because as I was gearing up to leave, I wanted it to be any new clients I have coming in, okay, I'm going to be out of town, I'll touch base. But that's a new client. There's no kind of pre-existing understanding that, oh, we're in the middle of your case and time is of the essence. Or clients where things happen while I was gone. Oh, hey, got your email, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm back Monday, plan on hearing from you right away. And just that simple way to be able to kind of respond to those kind of maybe clients that need to get a little feedback as opposed to your automatic response, I think is really beneficial. Getting things done that are kind of hanging over your head. And then realistically, if you don't turn off and you don't disconnect, when you come back, you're going to be exhausted from not just your vacation, but from the anxiety of all the things you were worried about.
Yeah.
So one of the benefits of practicing what I'm preaching is that when I came back, I was in the office yesterday, Monday. I felt wonderful. It was that mental, psychological, emotional kind of break that I needed. And a lot of times I don't think I need a break. I'm a workhorse. But sometimes you do that, you're with families. My wife and I went to visit my father's side of the family. It was such a wonderful life experience that when I came back, it's like, all right, it's just a job. It's just work. Those things are really meaningful. And it gives you that perspective. So it's kind of like the old saying that if you think you can just work and then things will get done quicker, rather than taking breaks along the way, you realize you're actually not going to get it done quicker. And so it was a very nice break. I'm back. Fast forwarding into your actual question, John. The week's been good. I have a handful of things this week. I have a lot of new cases coming in, which is nice. I think coming into summer, it is a natural time people start trying to get things done. Traditionally, before the recent changes to the tax code, you get people with a lot more disposable income because of that tax return coming back. And so a lot of new cases coming in, getting a lot of approvals. And so it's a good time. It's a good time this week. Tomorrow I'm meeting with another attorney to go over a project I'm working on at Loyola Law School close by. And then on Thursday I have some USCIS issues I have to deal with. So leading up to June, this is a month of getting things done. And so I like those months. I like those months where it's like, all right, it's going to be 10, 12-hour day. But I look forward to it because, like I said earlier, this is the time to grind.
Yeah.
I'm rested, I'm relaxed, the weather's kind of getting better. And so I'm really motivated to kind of take every call, follow up with every request for help with an RFE, or if somebody has a problem, spend a little bit more time with them than I would have if I was kind of inundated with a lot of deadlines.
You mentioned about taking the calls. So I take my own calls, and sometimes if I get a lot of calls one day and they're like people that just drain me, and I notice myself kind of getting lethargic or just out of it. And one thing as a tip for other people I deal with this, I take a deep breath and I take it as if it's a whole new day, a whole new case, because that hello I say to them or response and how are you, what could be the difference in what the case is. And like the other day, and this is kind of on this idea, but the next level of it, I had a lot of people call and ask me, I just want to get the price. And I really don't like when people ask me that. And sometimes I'll tell them, if you meet a girl, you don't just say, hey, let's go to my room.
Oh, yeah.
You got to talk first, get to know me. And so I got annoyed, but I'm like, okay, usually I don't tell them. I just say, you got to meet. But this guy said, I'm a grad student. And I said, this is it. And he said, okay, bye. And then I got really frustrated with myself because I'm like, I've done it before where they came at me like that. and I turned it around. So he said, I'm a grad student, I'm not working, I have a joint sponsor. That's a fact. But I said, okay, before I tell you about the price, where are you going to school? What are you studying? It might be a topic I know something about, and I'll talk with him, get his opinion, develop some rapport with them. Then I'll ask, when did you get married? Where did you get married? Oh, that's cool. I got married there too at the Beverly Hills Courthouse. And if I spent 2 minutes talking about what he studies and where he got married to get to know him better, he would have been more comfortable to say, you know what, you don't have to tell me the price, I'll come to your consultation and talk with you. I really enjoyed talking with you. I'd stay in his memory. But because I got so caught up in being annoyed for being annoyed, I let a potential lead go for no reason. And I got frustrated myself in a way of saying, don't do this again. Even if you are frustrated, take a deep breath and take it as if new. You could take because I have charged for consultations. I have one woman, she's like, how much do you do free consultation? I said, no, but I always ask, well, what is your issue though? And then we talked, and I did what I usually would have done if I had more energy, and I talked with her for a few minutes, and she's like, you know what, I'll pay the consultation fee, I'll come, I like you. And I turned it around, and I got the case, and they're a lovely couple, and so I was really happy to do that. But you got to have the energy, and then even if you don't, you got to remember, these people are calling you the first time. They don't know you've had 20 calls or have to deal with USCIS or go to court and deal with a judge who's yelling at you. To them, you got to be a good lawyer and a happy lawyer and friendly and do it and put that energy. Get it wherever it's coming from, get that energy and bring it up for that initial impression, because you only have one impression. One is when they see you, how you look is one impression, and the other is when they hear you, it's usually times it's the phone call. So do your best, get your best behavior, take those calls, speak calmly, have a certain energy. I watch a lot of self-help gurus on YouTube and stuff, and he was saying like 10 different ways you can say hello. Sometimes you sound arrogant, sometimes you sound tired, sometimes you sound annoyed, sometimes you sound unprofessional. You got to fine-tune every second of it, because by perfecting how you say hello, just even say hello, not even the rest of the conversation, that could be a difference in you getting paid $5,000 or not, based on a hello. And we have a job where we can get paid $5,000 a month. Sometimes I'll calculate that people are getting paid $10, $15 an hour just to pay my consultation fee. They might have to work a week, just to pay their own car payment. They have to work a week out of a month just to pay for their car. I pay for my car in an hour, maybe even less than an hour. Mm-hmm. And that's crazy. So I got to be on my best behavior, because these people, just to be honest, they're paying a lot of money for what we do. It is really stressful and there's a lot of responsibility we do, but on their part, it's a lot of money. So you got to be A+ all around in everything you can.
It's an interesting concept to remind ourselves that to us, this is another phone call on another day in another work week in a sea of responsibilities.
Yeah.
But to the person on the other side, this might be the first time they ever call an attorney.
Yeah.
They may have been thinking about calling you for days, weeks, and
I've had clients. They found me. Then we're waiting for months, and we're sure we're just saving the money for a consultation fee.
And then they finally pick up. And so I think you're exactly right. The term is empathy. You need to empathize with the other side and realize that they're speaking quickly, or they're brash and maybe
nervous.
Annoying, nervous. Yeah. But that's not because they're trying to bother you. It has everything to do with, this is really scary stuff. There's a lot riding on this. They've maybe been told by other people that it's not possible. And so I think you're absolutely right. I think every phone call from a business standpoint, and this sounds a little bit cliche, but it is a potential lead. Even if it's somebody asking for, how do you use the website?
Yeah.
Because building relationships is not about, okay, how do I monetize this right now? How can I do this as quick and as humane as possible? That's what robots do. Mm-hmm. We are human beings. It is about the dance, the relationship building, the rapport. And I always think to myself, when I got married and I had to find vendors and I had to find photographers and I had to find, figure out all of these people that exist to take advantage of someone like me. Yeah. So you went into those phone calls and emails like, hey, I'm interested, but I'm not going to sign anything. Just what are your pricing? Yeah. And it's the same thing where when it's somebody that says, hey, no pressure, this is what we can do, we can make it work with you. It really took you off the ledge and you brought your guard down. And that's when you can kind of have that honest conversation. So I definitely agree with you that you have to remind yourself when you pick up the phone or respond to that email, you don't know what that person's experiencing. And that how you do say hello, how are you? Sometimes a lot of what I do is really just kind of give up the farm over the phone. Oh, I would do A, B, and C. So if you do that, you should be fine. And for a lot of attorneys, they don't do that because they're scared that they'll kind of give away their intellectual strategy or legal strategy, and the person will just go off with it.
Yeah.
But sometimes by giving it up for free, people say, "Oh, okay, you know what you're saying. It sounds like you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've already convinced me. Okay, here's my money."
Yeah.
And so it's just like dating, which is something I oftentimes analogize to. If you're thirsty, if you really want this person's information because you want to hang out with them, you're going to come off as a little crazy.
Yeah.
If you play it cool,
desperate. Yeah.
exactly. If you play it cool and allow someone to get away, sometimes that's what people need to be able to come back to. Additionally, nobody's going to close on 100% of their leads, right? It's an impossibility.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you got to remind yourself, all right, what did I pull in this week or this month? Okay, I'm okay. So if I miss a couple or people aren't calling me back after I give them whatever information or pricing, it'll be all right. I'll make it up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of goes back to something I think we both believe in strongly. It's all about that attitude. You got to stay positive. You got to stay upbeat.
Yeah.
And that goes back to just how you a simple communication. You have to remind yourself they don't know what this is like, and you are the face of the solution. Be inviting. Don't respond like somebody who's been doing this 30 years. That you hear these stories where, oh, I talked to an attorney and they scared me. You don't want to scare people,
Yeah.
right? You want people to feel comfortable when they talk to you.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's all about people. I mean, at the end of the day, you can have a case where the officer gets the law wrong, but they just like you and it works. I mean, there's all sorts of things. It's just got to be good personality, empathy. Empathy is a big factor, and it's just business and life just to be able to deal with it. It's a big factor.
I'll give you an example of a case that kind of changed midstream, and I could understand the ultimate goals of the petitioner, or the caller.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a current client of mine who was a K1. This a fiance visa. Fiance was from Mexico. He's a U.S. born citizen. He actually came to me through his father, who met me somewhere. Father's a judge. So right off the bat, wow, like how lucky am I that a judge who sees lawyers all the time called me and we had a conversation, connected me with the son. And this was sometime last year. As we're getting the K1 off the ground, they get pregnant. And all of a sudden, his business is also taking off down, out of the country. And so he says, we really can't do this. If we have to get on a bird and fly over, having got the visa in 6 to 8 months or whatever the case, I don't think we can. I said, well, if you're going to be down there, and let's just get married. I know you thought it was quicker here because you wanted to be here together. But if you're going to stay down there with her, let's just take care of it.
Even better.
Exactly. Why I bring it up is because I knew at the end of the day it was about being together. It was about making sure that during the pregnancy and then the birth, she wasn't having to get up and go somewhere.
Yeah.
Additionally, I understood that as long as I could talk through it and kind of answer the questions that I could hear him asking without him asking, that ultimately got him to where it was, okay, what do I need to, what is your fee? That's fine. What do I need to send you? And I think we have to, as attorneys, really work on not just that empathy, but that communication skills. And people tell us all the time what they want without ever telling us. How often are people more worried about their kids being able to go to school and don't care about their green card at all?
Yeah.
How often are people worried about the work permit or the travel permit and don't actually care about the green card? Because in the immediacy of their needs has to do with a byproduct of the ultimate process, not the process itself. And if you're not picking up on that, then you're ultimately not speaking to their goals, and they're going to stay anxious, causing you more work and causing them to be not as satisfied a client as you'd like. Because your past clients are your greatest referral source. And so you have to remind yourself that the experience is just as important as the ultimate goal.
I mean, it's such an important thing you said, because it's a major tip I give, if you consider it a tip, is when I have a consultation for a marriage case, I start off asking about their lives and what they're trying to do and what's important with them. Then I get into, after the support or this and that. And I tell them, listen, I'm going to adjust the law to what you need, not like tell you what you need to do and then have you adjust your lives. And going back to what you talked about at the beginning, sometimes people that don't know, for an ASC Biometrics appointment, they might cancel their trip because they think they have to go out there. But I say, if they let me know they have trips, they communicate with me what their goals are, what their plans are, I can say, okay, we'll just go early, or we file the case after you come, or whatever way that works out best. So I spend the first quarter of a consultation getting to know them, what their plans are about school, life, how soon they need a work permit. And that becomes really important. Like when you talk about K-1s, they don't know that when you come on a K-1, you got to file for a work permit, and that's not going to come anytime soon nowadays. So then you're left out of work. So people are sometimes like, oh, I want to come in and adjust status. I'm like, well, we're not supposed to do that, but if you do, you're not going to get a work permit for 6 months. You're not going to get a Social Security number for at least 6 months. So you're going to stay at home, and I've had clients who would just stay at home waiting, and that causes fights in the household where the gentleman's working outside in his home country, and then he comes here and sits all day, not making any money. He's a go-getter, but he's sitting at home watching, I was going to say Donahue. I'm not that old. What is it? Phil Maury-Povich, the one who are the father?
Just
daytime TV. And he's going to go nuts, and then he's going to come home and fight. And I've had clients. I have one right now. The neighbors called domestic violence on them. Luckily, charges dropped. But now it's out of state, so I don't want to go to the interview. But now I'm like, because he has this arrest, they let him go. I have to go to the interview and fly out now. But because he's always stuck at home and he didn't expect it. And so, that's the factor I say. I said, listen, we can get you a green card somewhere or another, but can you, sit at home after a K-1 and just wait for it? Can you afford that? And it's like, no, I'm in my prime right now. I need to grow. I need to work and if I'm sitting home without a Social Security number, it's not going to work. So I say, okay, then we'll adjust things the way you need to do it. Maybe not do the K-1, which is regularly the case. Go get married. We'll do consular processing so that when you're working while the case is pending, but then once you arrive, you'll have a work permit too, or a green card at that point. And, you'll be away for a little farther time, but you know what? The process is a little bit cheaper doing consular processing through marriage. That money you save in filing fees, attorney fees, buy a plane trip and go see each other in the meantime. Have a trip. But, because a lot of times people think, K-1s is going to save them so much time and stuff, but there's a lot of additional steps that come with it that just make it my last choice. And even the K-3, which is not really happening, sometimes people read about it online. These websites, they're helpful, these websites. They go. The funniest thing is they come to me sometimes and say, I got my NOA 112 or 2. I'm like, what is that? Oh, there's like this notice. I'm like, I just call it a receipt. I don't know. I-797 this. I'm like, I don't know. I just call it a receipt or my biometrics. That's about it. But there's this whole science they create on these websites that do yourself kind of stuff. And you read what people read right there. There's bad information. There's good information too sometimes, but it just people panicking and stuff. I'm like, well, they just need someone to be there with them because they're panicking about all the wrong things. And a lot of times they panic about things that make no difference about anything. And there's stuff that they shouldn't panic on. They don't even notice. So I lost track of what my initial point was.
Well, it's I think a reminder, and I think this is something that is a general theme in all of your videos and podcasts, is that this is not one size fits all work. This is, I have a cough, something hurts. I can't go on WebMD and diagnose myself. I have to go to a professional who will say, oh, there may be something going on in your lungs that, given your history, given your genetic makeup, given your your cultural makeup, it could be this. But the only reason they know that is because they practiced this medicine for so long. Similarly, if you're an attorney listening or watching this, you have to remind yourself that you're diagnosing people. And you have to provide that diagnostic early on so that people understand the value. If you're not an attorney and you're listening to this, you have to remind yourself that this is not easy. Even when it's quote unquote easy, it's not easy. It's kind of like, look at the NBA. They make playing basketball so easy. But it's not easy. Go and shoot a 22-footer and try to make it consistently. Try to make it 43% of the time. Whatever mark you think is like, oh, that's bad for the NBA. They've spent their entire life perfecting the ability to shoot a ball in the hoop. And it's a testament to this kind of bird's eye view society we now live in because of the internet. We're consuming so much media that we oftentimes confuse knowledge with experience. And that just because I know how to do it doesn't mean that I have the experience to do it. And so, if you're not aware of that as a practitioner, that that's what the world is like, then how are you going to be able to deal with your clients in a way that can solve their problems, make them feel better, and like you said, being able to diagnose what people's real issues are. Because, how often with an I-751, if somebody gets their initial green card and then sure enough, sometime after you get a call from one of the parties, hey, it's so-and-so, the representation's done, the relationship's over. Hey, it's not really working out. I'm thinking about divorce, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, okay, well, the party's not over. You only were married for a year and a half. You have a 2-year green card, or she or he, your partner has a 2-year. There's going to be another massive kind of level of scrutiny eventually. And because processing times are taking so long, it's taking longer. And so you need to be able to articulate problems that you foresee down the line. I had somebody reach out to me about an I-751 interview post-divorce. They were married about a year and a half. And then it ended for several reasons. They relocated cities for work, and things didn't work out. Hundreds of joint documents, great declarations. Still got called in an interview because we're seeing that almost regularly with divorce cases, waiver cases. And he was nervous, and I'm like, at the end of the day, the officer needs to make a decision that says, given everything that you've filed and given your testimony, were you legitimately in a relationship for all reasons but for immigration? And did it end because of any reason other than you got your immigration benefits? And sometimes people just need to hear those very simple words to say, oh yeah, okay, I can now see kind of through the trees and the noise. Now I see what they're coming with and what their goals are. And if you as the practitioner and attorney are not able to articulate those things, then you're going to get people worried about things that don't matter. You're going to be spending more time talking about things that aren't really material. And it's ultimately going to lead to more burnout. You're not going to be able to get to the gym that day, all the other things we're talking about. Because at the end of the day, by the time, once you get up and out of bed to when you kind of slow down, you have X amount of hours in a day. And you want to maximize that efficiency so that when you do sit down for the evening or get a bite to eat and you kind of want to turn off, you want to feel like, okay, yeah, I got ahead of where I wanted to be and I can start tomorrow kind of ahead of the game, as opposed to always playing catch up, which I think we all know what that's like.
So what do you have planned the rest of summer?
So for those of us that are AILA members, American Immigration Lawyers Association, big conference you and I were talking about recently, in about 5 weeks. It's going to be in Orlando this year. I'm speaking at the conference this year, which is something I've been doing more and more.
Which panel are you speaking on?
So my panel is going to be on a more fundamental track about notice to appears. This would be the document, the charging document people get who are brought into removal proceedings or deportation. And so I'm on a 3-person panel, and it's kind of more of a nuts and bolts.
This on Wednesday, it's the first night?
Yeah, it's a Wednesday, so like almost the night before day one, right? Yeah. So I'm kind of gearing up for that. On top of that, I kind of break up the year into 2 parts, 6 months and 6 months. And so as I look through the finances, as I look through the health of the firm, I'm kind of seeing, okay, how am I doing? Do I need to be doing more? Am I tracking very well? So I've been doing a little bit more of my own kind of financial diagnostics, and things are good. Again, I'm not someone that says no very often. As you know, I fly all over the country. I kind of take cases as they come.
Yeah.
And because I have that energy, and again, no kids, stuff like that, it's been a really, really successful model for me. That at the end of the day, if somebody wants to hire you, even if it's far away or even if it's not convenient, I'm still reminded that that's a honor that people are seeking me out, as opposed to somebody who's maybe closer to them or one of my many contemporaries. Yeah. And so it's been really good. That's kind of how I'm going into the summer. I think I'll end up taking some time off at the end of summer, end August, early September. We have a lot of moving parts within the immigration debate politically and by way of Congress. And so one thing that I'm telling a lot of my DACA clients and then potential clients is I do think there'll be a DACA fix eventually. So in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about gearing up, hiring people in my office, kind of preparing for some type of massive shift to where there would be a lot of people looking for established attorneys who know what they're talking about, especially because if there's a change and nobody knows how that change is going to work, most people want to go to somebody who's established. Yeah. Because they say, okay, you might not know how this is working, but at least you have the experience and track record to figure these things out. And so it's still only, late spring, early summer 2019, but we'll be in it'll be 2020 before we know it. And again, in immigration, it's always changing. And now we know that even president to president, term to term, that could mean very good and very bad things for us.
Yeah. Now, you were in Washington, D.C. recently for
the
day of action. Any news or tidbits come out of
that? So it seemed like at the end of the day, there was I think there was maybe about 1,000 of us represented across the country that all came to Washington, D.C. to speak to our representatives. It seemed like Democrats were all on the same page. Get something that Republicans will agree to. We're on board with these themes and ideas. We just don't think it's going anywhere because the Republicans are basically all, kind of.
Even the ones that would say yes, Trump has so galvanized his base to say no that they're probably afraid to even walk down the line.
It's kind of like you've made your bed, another lane in it, and so you're trying to, or at least have really.
Were you able to communicate with any Republican?
So because I was just essentially assigned through the program of the day, I was just assigned to local state legislators or House of Reps, and then we did go to our senator's office, Feinstein and Harris. But of course, we were talking to their liaisons, and we were never talking to them directly. But what was valuable as far as even the Democrats and people that are very pro-immigration reform is not only updating them of what's going on outside of the border, the migrant crisis at the border, and asylums and child separation, but talking H-4s, visas for spouses of H-1Bs, talking F-1 students, kind of talking about some of the nuanced things that do get lost in the humanitarian conversations. And so
a lot of technical stuff that people even know about.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think therein lies the hard part with advocacy is how can you talk about anything but child separation? How can you talk about anything but, the statistics about how much harder things are getting, naturalization. But what's valuable was getting contact information, and now we're following up. We're doing regular follow-up with our local leaders to say, hey, this is what's happening in your district. We are seeing a doubling in naturalization times. That's something you can work with. Oh, we are seeing ICE showing up to court for people to handle their business and then being detained. Those are things that are happening on the ground. Because as you can imagine with congressional reps, there's a lot of noise they hear on Twitter and through the various avenues of media. But for you to be able to say, hey, I represent a group that has 12,000 plus members in Southern California.
Southern California has 12,000.
Yeah, or excuse me, 1,200. Yeah. Over 1,200. The Oregon only has 15,000.
Yeah.
These are what we're seeing collectively. We'd love to talk to you about it. Or, hey, we're doing this thing, we'd love to have you down there. And because I think politically, on one part, it looks really good for them because they're actually doing it. But on the other side, they're actually getting substance.
Yeah.
And in this day and age with lip service, I think our representatives who are actually doing things and then can get it on Twitter and on Facebook and stuff, those are the things that will last. And so National Day of Action was really powerful, and it seemed like a lot of what immigration which is slow but forward progress. And so sometimes even just being there ends up being valuable, because in 2 years' time, when maybe we are able to flip the White House and potentially even move on the Senate in 2020 as well, those conversations you can kind of build off of and say, oh, we've been talking about this for years, as opposed to thinking, oh, we have a Democrat in the White House, we have one House of Congress, okay, now we can show up. Yeah. And they're like, oh, well, get in line. You have 25 people that have their issues as well that aren't immigration related. So it was really good. Other things that are coming up, it's kind of each and every. I kind of take it as it comes, but we do have finally an unthawing of our relationships locally with some of our USCIS committee meetings, and so that's something else that we'll finally be able to have back on our calendar.
It's a national dilemma because DHS essentially said to cut off all its liaison meetings. I know USCIS cut them off, ICE was cutting them off, CBP never cut them off, so I guess Correct. It's not a DHS, it's the USCIS, maybe ICE thing. We're working together because it's having some sort of, there was, even with communist Russia, we had that phone, the red phone.
Oh, yeah.
You got to talk, even if you don't like each other or having problems. And it's not even necessarily that we don't like USCIS, it's just nature of the beast. They have to do their thing to prevent fraud and to make sure things are done properly, and we got to do our thing to kind of prevent fraud too. We're the first line of defense, but help work the ones that aren't fraud, that just are messy. Some couples get married and they don't take a photo at their wedding, and it's like, well, why don't you take a photo? Like, well, we're not into photos.
We're not photo people. Yeah.
Do your parents know you got married? No. Why? Well, because I don't have a relationship with my family. I don't tell them this stuff. Okay, so when you go there, explain that's why your parents don't know, because you don't have a relationship with them. Don't just say they don't know and make it sound fishy. So it's just the nature of the beast. But going back to the politics, I remember a week ago what they said that the president's son-in-law is going to give a proposal out that he had he talked with Miller and these people, but still nothing's out on that. So we'll see what happens. It's a weird situation with immigration. it's just such a every day it's some new
Every
thing.
day.
Every day is a new thing.
Well, and this goes back to the idea that even in some of our recent case law in the removal defense world, that bedrock case law, bedrock grounds for asylum, all of a sudden, because of the whim of politics and an attorney general, they were just wiped clean.
Yeah.
And now you had decades of rules that were basically said, nope, these don't apply anymore.
That's one of the biggest things I'd like to focus on when it comes to political correction is making immigration courts Article 3 courts. And I know some judges Article 3 like
I think Article 1.
Article 1 or Article 3, one of those articles. Yes, I got to know the Constitution better. But the situation is, and no disrespect to the people sitting as judges, but they're not judges. They're employees of the Justice Department.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not impartial. They're on the same side as the prosecutor. It's a kangaroo court. And, I could say more easily because I don't practice in front of the immigration court, but I know, I've met the head of the union. She's a very nice woman, Judge Tabador. I mean, no disrespect, but if you're an employee of the Justice Department, you're not a judge. You're not impartial. And so that system has to change. It has to be an independent judiciary. It's not fair. It's a civil court, and you're detaining people and taking away their due process and holding on to them for extended periods of time because of it. I totally get a bond hearing or something, but it's a civil court. It's not a criminal court to do that. I'm giving a speech at UCLA next week, and I was doing research about the numbers and what ICE is doing, this kind of stuff. And ICE has decreased the number of people they pick up that have criminal issues, and because they took away priorities, and they're just arresting everybody now. And then they interviewed, the spokesperson for ICE. ICE said, if you enter the U.S. illegally or overstay your visa, you're committing a criminal offense, so you can be detained. It's not a criminal offense to overstay your visa; it's a civil violation. And due process. Once that slippery slope of taking away people's rights are in the U.S., and frankly, I think Constitution applies for the government's actions everywhere in the world. But let's say it only applies to the U.S. If someone is here and you could, take away their rights, human rights of being able to move and stuff like that, or hold them in jail and stuff, you got to have a hearing, right to a speedy trial. You should have a speedy trial, which right now is taking years. The conditions have to be okay. I know a lot of people that are anti-immigrant don't want to hear that, but we got to treat the government's authority that the state's wrath has to be exercised properly, because right now they're going to go after people that are easy picking. It's that old story, first they came for the communists, then they came for the trade unionists, all that kind of stuff. It's going to come back at you, and that's the takeaway of my speech. And it's not going to be political in a sense of saying, oh, at the border, what's happening, and people listen here when we talk. I'm not I don't usually talk about child separation, border stuff, asylum. I don't even handle those cases. My big thing is just rights as a human being, and the constitutional guarantees we have to get due process, and that gets undermined. It starts with the immigrants because they're easy picking, and it's eventually going to come down to all of us. They're going to pick us one at a time. As if the economy goes bad, then we need to find scapegoats, and things get worse. And so we got to draw lines here, saying no, we need due process. The immigration court has to be a fair judiciary. It has to be independent, and we can't have Attorney General wake up one day and change decades long rule of law overnight by summoning a case and say I'm going to make a decision from the BIA, whatever the BIA usually is. Not even good decisions, but it's unbelievable. And I didn't, because I don't have practice for immigration court. I didn't know they could do that. When that first one happened, when Sessions I'm going to take this case to myself. I'm like, what? You could do that?
Oh yeah.
What kind of a joke is this? You can't just do that.
Well, and I think the lone silver lining of the current climate is we realize how fickle and how fragile the entire system is. It's built on a one-sided conversation that we just hope they play nice.
Yeah.
And this is what we're now seeing when they don't play nice. And because of their own political kind of venom to basically trying to shock a portion of the electorate, by shocking them and potentially trying to come through this administration on a single promise. This one is like, all right, I'm going to be hard on immigration. And to your point, it's such an easy punching bag, and it doesn't mean or say anything. But it sounds good, and it sounds like something that we hear every few decades when when the guard is changing and somebody who's in power is going away. They're like, all right, well, immigrants, right? And that's not the United States alone. The rest of the world,
historically,
exactly, does the same thing. The problem is that in the meantime, there's going to be a lot of lives that are ruined and lost. And if our goal is to really try to reward the hardest working of us, the people that give more to the economy and to society than take, then there should be a case-by-case analysis on things like their immigration history. It would be the same thing of tax issues. If somebody, unrelated to immigration, if somebody doesn't pay their taxes or they owe taxes or there's some issue, well then usually there's a case-by-case analysis. Okay, what is the proper way to punish this person? Now in that world, it's all money, but there's certain ways that you can pay less money or more money, right? And so you're absolutely right that when we have this system that is not independent, and this was actually a big platform for the National Day of Action last month, where we were going and saying this is something that's constitutional, this is a very easy thing to move, and realistically, since 2003 when the Department of Homeland Security was created, this is not something that we've always had. This is a new concoction based on a reaction to 9/11.
Yeah.
It's an easy thing to fix, and I think as lawyers, having studied the law, understanding the principles of the law and what our Constitution was built on, it's a black and white conversation. Unfortunately, these days, nobody wants to have a black and white conversation because oftentimes one side is just going to lose, and so they have to muck it up and pretend like it's a lot more gray.
Yeah.
But the positive, like I said, of this time is we realize that we need to kind of insulate this court system away from politics.
Yeah.
Just how if the flip side, if all of a sudden if you have somebody that's super pro-immigrant, you wouldn't want somebody just creating
Everyone come in all of a sudden.
or even just like we don't have deportation court anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, technically I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, realistically it's kind of like decriminalizing marijuana. I think it's going to only benefit us because of the reasons why we criminalized it once upon a time in the beginning. In the first place, and then the people that it actually affects, that it's very disproportionate. And so it's an interesting time because as an immigration attorney, every day you're forced to think about these larger aspects of what our principles are as a country. And we go to naturalization interviews all the time. Part of that interview is the oath of allegiance to the Constitution. And what is the oath of allegiance? What is the rule of law? That there's nobody above the Constitution. The Constitution is the law of the land. Nobody's above that. And so it's an interesting part of our democratic experiment that we put above individuals, royalty, families, money, this idea of the rule of law. We're not seeing that these days. We're seeing people make a mockery of that principle that supposedly is the bedrock part of our entire country, right?
When the travel ban happened, I mean, that was the largest indicator in my lifetime of the lack of rule of law. Where people with green cards, even some citizens, they couldn't fly in or being detained with no right to attorney, not knowing what was going on. Even CBP didn't know what was going on. They didn't even tell them. That's amazing. But they just said, okay, this is a rule of law. Overnight, we're going to ban a whole group of people that have full rights to come here. And, it was like, okay, it's all garbage. And it just shows how fickle the system is, and every system really is. All you need is one person, might makes right, to say, today we're going to do it like this.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some people who are going to support him, diehard supporters, and there's going to be against it, but then there's civil strife in society. And it undermines the respect to all the institutions over time, and it wears it down. It's just very Roman-esque, and like Rome slow teeter down into chaos and disintegration. These are, when they look back in history, they're like, okay, some president overnight just said, rule of law out the window, and what they call the travel ban in 2000 and whatever, and that caused people to be like, oh, really, laws are bullshit. It's like, oh yeah, that is the joke like that. You could just say, snap your finger, and the Attorney General could change laws. Oh, the laws are garbage. They don't mean anything, and so what? I'm not going to respect the laws either. So they're undermining themselves by doing these kind of things. There's a reason why there's happened. As bad as Congress people are, most of them are pretty garbage. They still stick to at least the formalities of things, and because they understand you can't just overnight make law. You have to fight it out, argue. Sometimes it's slow, but that slowness is what helps potentially give time to fight back if there's bad decisions going. But when you have an executive that could usurp power and just on a whim make a decision like this without telling anybody, not even telling the heads of departments and the people that are actually going to enforce the law, and not even telling you what the law is to enforce, they have to sit and read it like we do. It just undermines the entire structure of the system, and that is going to affect the economy, the banking system, the education system. Everything is going to reverberate that lawlessness into everything, and it's happening right now. And then we have to live with that. And it's unfortunate that someone is that gung ho and it doesn't have an understanding of history and the amount of power. You can have a lot of power, but you got to know how to wield it. and to wield it in such a like a maniac is insane, reckless way. It's so dangerous.
Well, think about growing up. You learned about Japanese internment, right? Mm-hmm. Prior, during, and after World War II, and we now realize that the lasting generational effects that Japanese internment had. You had hundreds of thousands of Japanese and Japanese Americans on the West Coast basically told you have to report, you have to leave everything behind, your property, again, things that are supposedly vested in the Constitution, your personal effects, all the things that you've worked very hard for. You got put into a camp in, the big one here in Southern California, Manzanar, right? And Santa Anita you're basically quarantined off because we think you're going to do something bad. Ultimately, nothing happened. And then when we're released, we say sorry. But by that point, your property was already seized. People are living in your communities. Think about what it is to be an American, which is this bootstraps mentality, or that if you work hard enough, you can accomplish this goal. And then somebody decides, no, because of where your family comes from, we're going to strip you of all of those particular rights. And then once it's over, we're going to hope you forget about it. And so I read something recently, because it was the 50th anniversary, about how, 50th anniversary? That would have been more. It was an anniversary, and how, I think it was something like 200,000, of the 200,000, or 150, 200,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans that were interned, 75% of them were U.S. citizens, born in the United States. And that goes to, you strip it back, Japanese Americans were not able to become citizens until 1946. So your grandparents could have been born in Japan in 1890, 1910. Your parents could have been born in 1920. You could have been born in 1940. You're a second generation American.
Yeah.
And yet it's not until you're in your 20s that you can actually be an American. And this is after, the Civil Rights Amendments. This is far after a time when there was any ambiguity about it. And so to fast forward to now, to penalize people not because of where they're from, but now because of their religion, and then in part because of where they're from, it just is a testament to, as a country like the United States is built on immigration and our immigrants, and people come here, they leave everything else behind, their comforts and their trappings, because they think it'll be a better gamble to try to make it on their own here. Mm-hmm. And that spirit is what has made America great in the past. But under the current kind of climate, imagine being from anywhere in the world and being very bright and being very motivated. I don't know if you want to come to the United States, especially if your skin tone is a little bit darker, especially if you decide not to be Christian. And so it's kind of one of those things where you think about our leadership and whether they actually care about 10 years from now. I think maybe they care about 10 months from now and what helps their bottom line.
I was talking with somebody about the other day. It seems like all the thinking that's going on, it's all like within this year what's going to happen.
Micro.
There's no medium and long-term planning, it seems. And unless there's some sort of super sophisticated stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about, which I doubt, it seems like everything has come down to what's going to happen tomorrow and maybe next week, but nothing down the line when it comes to treaties or organizations or planning or anything like that. And that's like really risky maneuver we're doing when it comes to the lack of planning that's happening.
Well, and welcome to the millennial generation.
Yeah.
We were born into a time when the world was changing. We were told we can be, we'll be millionaires. We just got to follow our dreams and it'll work out.
Yeah.
The internet happened, so we have to kind of make do and kind of figure that out as we're growing up. And now you get out of school, professional school, what have you. It took twice as much to actually get here. You come out making half as much as any generation in the past, and you're told you're entitled. On top of that, we have a essentially political crisis that we haven't seen in decades and generations that we're now inheriting, so that when they're long gone, it's going to be our problem to fix, right? So it's a really fascinating part of being, I would say, being an 80s baby, that if you think it's going to get easier, no, because the lack of planning, whether it's climate change, whether it's Social Security, whether it's boomers retiring, whether it's the housing crisis, if you think things are going to get easier, you're not paying attention. And just because maybe you're being successful in mobilizing yourself financially, if everybody else is doing worse around you, one, you should be conscious of that as a human being.
Yeah.
And two, inevitably it's going to affect you as well.
Yeah.
Unless we all do well, nobody does well. And that's seen because we aren't a closed society. We're very much a cause and effect society.
I follow to a certain extent Iranian politics and stuff, and I see things that are happening there, which happen in Mao's China, and then Stalin or Stalinist or even pre-Stalin communist Russia, and even Nazi Germany, which is when this bifurcation of society happened, where there's this elite, and usually it's an elite that inherits the wealth and just keeps that alive, and they're not the elites that created the wealth, so they're not industrious or the people you can look up to, they're just essentially the president himself or his son-in-law.
Yeah,
People
like
just
the
got it.
bourgeois.
Yeah, exactly. They're in this aristocracy that got it without really providing that value in return. Um, as the masses get more impoverished, they look at that, and they get really mad. And that's when these cultural wars start happening, where they call them out on this, and the hatred gets so deep that it becomes self-destructive. So you saw this even in France when the revolution happened. They start eating their own. Like the poor got so frustrated, they attacked the elites. They're out of the way. Then they started killing each other. And I was reading a book on communist China. And everyone will point out, oh, he's a little more bourgeois than I am. And those same people who overthrew the government, and they're like, oh, you have glasses on, you have a nicer pair of shoes, you're one of those elitists. And they would attack them, and they start eating each other. And Iran, it happens like this, where it's an Islamic country, they overthrew the government. The same kind of mentality where this elite had a lot of money, and people in the countryside are frustrated with it, and they rallied around this religiousness just for the sake of doing it to a certain extent. And now they're like, oh, this person is not, beard isn't long enough, or they pick out stuff that's not based on the quality of which work you did, but it's easy things that people could rise up and do. And I see that happening now, where if this elite keeps continuing what they're doing, the masses are gonna rile against them. Then once they're done, they're gonna start eating each other out, calling each other out for stuff that's not even legit. And then especially the ones who want help, they get called out because they're trying harder, kind of mimicking the old system. But because they look similar to it, they could get hit without understanding that those people trying to make it better are mimicking the good parts of the old system. So essentially, what I'm saying is this order is collapsing, and we're seeing a slow collapse of it. And it's because the elites can't adjust and keep value alive. I think they're just born into a system where it's so comfortable, and they just continue. I think it's their right. And once you go, it's one thing. Nobody has a right to be the elite, but if you worked your butt off and got there, at least you provide some value back in return. But when you're inheriting that wealth and then just thinking you deserve it, the way you treat people is going to be horrible. And that's what we're seeing right now. The system in Washington, D.C., New York, the elites are really inheriting a lot of wealth. And, the school scandal that happened with the university is exactly it. It really showed, yeah, these people, they might have Harvard and Yale and Stanford degrees, but they bought their way into it. But in their minds, and some of them, they don't even know they bought their way into it. Their parents bought it, they didn't even know. So they're thinking, I went to this top school, I'm better than everyone else, so they're idiots, and so it's okay for me to, 10 pieces for me, 1 for you, 10 pieces for me from the taxpayer's dole. By going to wars and getting all these weapons, oh, well, the cannon fodder, who cares? And that's what we're seeing right now. That's very dangerous if it gets ratcheted up with the rhetoric against Russia, rhetoric against Iran, tariffs against China. It's against Mexico, this border crisis. This is a global meltdown of sorts. So it probably takes a while for it to play out, but we're seeing like a slow train wreck happening, and feel like no one's, even the people who might talk, let's say, about this issue, talk about, I don't think see it in a wider sense. It's very hard to see it like that. It's really hard to do anything about it. It seems like it's such a big thing. It's not. It's bigger than all of us, and I think it's a cycle that plays itself out. And I kind of like watching a film of it happening, but there's nothing I can do about it other than our community here talking about it, doing the best to get some cover over our heads. That's about it. Make as much money as they can and help colleagues to do the same and take care of their families and have some sort of community to help each other to a certain extent. And that's about as far as I do. And really just enjoying my time with my family while I'm here. So it's a really existentialist kind of aspect of it. But I just went to the huge political philosophy stuff. That's been on my mind a lot, seeing when I see the news when people say privilege. And I'm a right of center kind of guy, to be blunt. So like that, a lot of that mentality, even climate change, I'm not the biggest believer in that kind of stuff. People are gonna tune out if I say that stuff. But I understand where it's coming from. I understand the pollution here sucks. So we got to do all the things we need to cut down this pollution, whether it's climate change, whether it's just I'm getting cancer from all the goddamn smog in LA. The solutions are the same for both of them. So we don't have to necessarily agree about how that's going to play out, but we know how to fix it is going to be the same thing we need to do. But the privilege situation, some of it is, or like that terminology they use, something about appropriating my culture and stuff. To me, growing up, if someone appropriated my culture, that's a sign of respect, that they loved it enough to see it. But now people are taking offense about it, and there is some offense. Some things they're using it to their benefit, not giving back, and all of that. But these are signs that this it goes back to elites are taking these goods, using it for themselves and not giving back, and then that causes pain. Eventually, these people are going to overthrow the elites. That's how it's happened historically. But then between themselves, they're going to be like, oh, you're acting a little more privileged, and they're going to eat themselves. And that culture war is a nightmare if it happens. I've seen it daily when I listen to Iranian radio and I see someone who like is Islamic and they see a woman down the street, and it might be another Islamic woman. They say, oh, one of your hairs are showing, and they'll slap her in the face. And it's like, it's not based on value in society. What happens there is based on this artificial sense of I'm more religious, or I'm more woke, or this kind of stuff we see here, or communist Russia or China. They'll say, I'm more of a communist. I have my red book from Mao, and my red book is bigger than your red book, or you don't carry around all the time. You're not as good. It goes into frivolousness eventually, and they start eating each other. And that's my worry if it happens here over this terminology that we're seeing coming out of like colleges and a lot of it always comes from a truth. There's a truth there, but then there's two people. There are people that are lazy and just use that to their benefit, and then correlate that as other people who are like, I don't really believe in this stuff, but I know if I use these key words, I could get a lot of power underneath me, so I'm going to abuse that. And those people always, those demagogues rise up and abuse it, and that's where Hitler came from. Blaming Trump, Lenin and Mao. They see the discontent society and they feel it. Trump probably did focus groups and said, "Oh, saying wall." It means come out now. The wall thing you didn't even know about. They said, "Say wall." Let's keep saying it, and then people are going to cheer on. It's like, okay, I'll keep saying wall all day until I get voted. And that's the risk of, and that's what worries me. And there's nothing you can do about it, but and even talking about it, it's going to cause people to get offended. But that's what's on my mind while I'm driving the car. I think about a lot, and immigration is a big part of that.
I think the aspect of privilege ultimately comes down to people having the discipline to actually diagnose their own privilege. And I think if you're male, if you're straight, if you're white, or at least passing white, right? Iranians are white, but not necessarily white. And
you don't get all the privilege.
Exactly.
You get some,
And so I think the difficult part of almost understanding yourself as you are perceived versus how you perceive yourself, right? You could be white, straight male, but have be dirt poor. You could have lost your parents. They could have dealt with discrimination and all those things. And then when you rise up, you say, no, I'm 100% self-made and I'm proud of it. But the person who's not white, not straight, not male sees you and they see everything that you represent, not you yourself. So ultimately it comes down to that person, and I am nothing. I'm white, I'm straight, I'm male. Sure, my dad's from somewhere else. Sure, I'm mixed, right? I'm Mexican-American. And my mom, very working class background, not a lot of guidance as a young person, had to figure it out. My dad, poor cowboy from a very small town. However, I know, and I think emotionally and psychologically aware enough to know that when I walk up down the street and I look like this, I know what I look like. And I think that's hard for people to understand. I think it's hard for people that are in a position of privilege or perceived privilege, right, to be able to say, oh, okay, I can see why they would think that about me or say that about me. Because as soon as it gets emotional, as soon as someone says something to you and you take offense to it, all logic is off. It's now just emotion, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's something to be said about we're finally at a time where everybody has a voice because of the internet. The problem about a lot of voices is there's a lot of noise. And so you have to be able to kind of understand those particular viewpoints and avenues and then synthesize them and digest them to make sense of it. But that takes time. That takes a level of understanding and psychological kind of sharpness and maturity that not everybody has. One or two, people think, well, the age-old adage, if I haven't experienced it or if it doesn't happen to me, then it doesn't exist. Yeah. And so I think we are just past the point in time where you can go about life, la-di-da-di-da, head in the clouds, and everything was going to be fine. Yeah. I think now the people at a younger and younger in age are taking on the anxieties and concerns and problems that the adult world deals with, and they're not knowing how to cope with it because they didn't have that time to mature into it.
Plus, there's a lot more. I mean, it seems like every parents, grandparents, they had certain aspects of life that were harder, but the intensity of life right now, it seems like it's much more difficult. It's nonstop. I mean, the easiest thing on the internet, if you had a bad day at school, you could go home and shut it off. Now it's never ending.
Well, what's interesting is I think I'm a firm believer. I'm very progressive. I'm very much a believer that everything is getting more something, meaning that for our grandparents' generation, they were told from their grandparents' generation that, oh, you don't have it as hard as I did.
Yeah.
And our parents comparatively and our, vice versa. What I think happened is with the internet and globalization, we just jumped a few generations.
Yeah.
So the speed of change happened so much quicker. So I don't think change is any different. I think the speed of it is different.
Yeah.
And so, think about it from the standpoint of what is a 21-year-old and a 65-year-old. They are literally living in two very distinct realities. And a 65-year-old grew up and kind of earned their mark in a different time than the 21-year-old did. So if they don't have the skill sets to be able to understand those very different vantage points, and then it becomes, oh, you're this or you're that, and it's because it's easy because it fits in a tweet, then that's when we give just this, the type of almost explosive discourse.
Yeah.
And no longer is it actually about having a conversation.
It's insane amount of overgeneralization and lack
Gotta
of
be
nuance.
quick. Think about it, because of clickbait and because of the concept of monetizing everything, we've been dumbed down to the point of how we kind of consume information. The times of reading a book about a topic is not normal anymore.
Yeah.
Now it's about reading an article and thinking you know everything, reading a headline and thinking you know everything.
Yeah.
Because we now have so much access. We don't have more than 24 hours in a day. So how does one take in more information with the same amount of hours that 100 years ago they had? Well, they have to start doing short synopses and say, oh, yeah, I know about that, when in fact they don't know the nuance or the details because they didn't spend time doing it.
One of the things about this podcast format is interesting with the clickbait that's happening, this long-form conversation is growing too for a different aspect of the population, different perspective. There's people who are the clickbait, but they'll also listen to a podcast of choice. And the reason why I like it is because we could talk for an hour. And we're talking about pretty controversial as it gets kind of stuff right here. But at least you have time to flesh it out. I like we kept it at the last part of the conversation, so people who are just listening for a little bit, listen to the stuff we talked about. But you got to be an hour in, however long we are, you got to be really into the conversation. Hopefully we're interesting enough to keep you. But these are the stuff I always enjoy talking about. But it's always been hard to find people that had the patience to talk about it or had the depth enough to talk about it. But
Thank you, John. I think that's a compliment. I appreciate that. Well, I think to that point, just being able to have difficult conversations and not boil over with anger, that takes, like you said, emotional maturity. It also takes an understanding that part of privilege is just being able to talk about stuff and not actually affect our day-to-day livelihood.
Yeah. Right?
You and I can have conversations about the economy, immigration, police brutality, the weather and climate change and the changes that we're seeing. But at the end of the day, our bills are paid, our stomachs are full, our families are safe, and that's privilege, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't have, and this is historic, it was always the educated elite that got to talk about the kind of deep theoretical things that actually moved progress forward, because the majority of society was toiling the lands, trying not to die, right? So it's actually an interesting concept where I think we have to recognize that being able to be emotionally mature enough to be able to have a conversation about things, and then shut off the camera and be cool about it because we know, well, this matters, but at the same time, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing how what is happening politically matters, but what really matters is kids getting shot up in school. What really matters is people being poisoned because they're poor and they live in a part of the city or the country that their water's poisoned.
Yeah.
What really matters is people fleeing, all these concepts where life and death and people being born into a situation that they didn't decide and are trapped in it.
Claw their way out of it.
Absolutely. So I think it's very much, I think we're seeing a growing appetite for long form, because I think we're sick and tired. It's almost a backlash to the clickbait.
Yeah.
It's almost like, oh, yeah, quick fast food was good and we all grew up on it. But you know what? No, I'll take 45 minutes to make this thing, because I realize the experience of it all is actually better than simply tasting the food and being able to consume it in 10 minutes, spending $5 on it. But it takes a lot of time to be able to get to this point where the slower, more intentional conversations are actually better than the quick 30-second, 45-second clip that you can go over and then consume more and more different types of media.
Definitely. I don't even know where to go from there. There's a lot we could go.
Oh yeah, we'll call it a day, and
Yeah.
we'll get back to it next time. I'm sure
Yeah.
1,000 things will happen in the world and within immigration between this time and the next time. So I look forward to chatting
Thanks
with you
so
then.
much. It was always fun.
Always a pleasure,
Before
John.
next
Thank you very much.
All right, bye guys. Till next time.
Bye, guys.